So Matt Walsh has a couple of series out there, a couple of videos. He started one about the civil rights movement, one about the Civil War, which you haven't been taught, which you've been lied to about. And it just seems like this guy keeps digging a hole deeper for himself every time he puts these videos out. But I want to talk about this because he is right in many respects, but he's just playing into the handbook of the 1619 Project. That's all he's doing. So if you're new, welcome to the Cultural Confederacy. It's Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I feel good. Now, what you see is what you get. Still shot, you, me, my voice, smartphone. We talk about the news of the day. Anything goes. When I started this channel, it was all about preserving great art, music, history, and culture, and correcting the record, and sometimes pointing out the absurdity of culture. And this is an insane cultural moment. When you have people who are praising, John Brown. So I've been having this discussion, once again, with somebody here on YouTube about the Civil War, about the Confederacy. Now, put this out there, and I've said this before, I'm not a neo-Confederate sympathizer, whatever the hell that means. Yes, I was born and raised in the South. But I can look at all sides of an issue. I can go back and check the history, and really, my beliefs didn't come from the Confederacy, believe it or not. Came from looking at the Articles of Confederation, looking at what they were talking about during the ratification debates. So let's get into this. I'm going to share some audio with you here, and then I want to share some stats with you over at Weber State, and some of the stats come from the University of Virginia. But thank you again for watching and subscribing. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll try to keep this as short as possible. See if I can do it under like maybe 12 minutes. 12 to 15 minutes. So let's get to this. I'm going to first share the audio with you. And this is funny. This is a real scream. Listen to this.
The truth is that if you want to understand the era of mass deception and racial hysteria that's been ongoing for decades in this country, you can't view the civil rights era in isolation. You have to go back much further than the 1960s.
Uh-oh.
Specifically, you have to understand that everything you've been taught about the Civil War is a lie as well. You have to understand why exactly the Civil War began, because no school in the entire country will tell you the actual reason.
Sacrilege!
This understanding, you have to put yourself in the position of a white American Southerner in the late 1850s.
You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't say that. You back it up. You can't say that. You can't say you have to put yourself in the position of a white Southerner in the South in the 1850s, early 1860s.
Because you're supposed to believe that
a deadly
white
sin.
American Southerners in the 1850s were cartoon villains, but they weren't. They were human beings. They were regular people. Now, let's run this thought experiment for a second using actual numbers from U.S. Census data.
Uh-oh.
Let's assume you're a normal guy, and just like 94%...
I'm a normal guy. Just a normal guy here in the South in the 1850s.
You don't own any slaves. I'll say that again.
Hey, groovy chick.
You were just like the 5.1 million other white people in the South, 94%, who did not own a single slave. You were not one of the 16,000 slave owners. And
well, the number on that is actually about 385,000 slave owners, so he's off on his numbers there. But it's true. Actually, slave ownership was a small percentage of the population at large, North and South, during that time.
And most of the people you know don't own slaves either. Slavery is not a part of your day-to-day life. Your attitude towards people of different races is probably about the same as the attitude of almost everybody in the North and almost everyone of every race on the planet at the time.
Wait. So there were racists in the North? You mean there were racist people in states like New York and, New Jersey?
Enlightened attitude by our standards today, but then nobody at the time, anywhere on the globe, of any race, had an attitude that we would consider racially enlightened.
That is true.
Even so, the supposedly anti-slavery good guys were on a campaign to massacre you and everybody who looks like you. They were.
Now, on that note, about this racist view, we have to understand, and I've talked about this before, in Europe, for example, race had a different meaning. It related more to culture, in the latter part of the 19th century, this rise in nationalism. So that was kind of the perception, and you still see that today when it comes to this idea of race. For example, talked about this before too, Hitler was looking for, in World War II, because everyone loves to compare the Confederacy to Nazi Germany. And I happen to be part German, so I know a lot about this because I've actually studied this, okay? But Hitler was really looking for a pure German culture that was superior to his European neighbors. That's what he wanted. And yes, he did talk about racial superiority, but that was in the terms of culture. He looked down on these other European ethnicities, if you will, these groups, like the Czechs, the Slavs. You did have the Romani, pardon me, in those groups. But he targeted a lot of people, and you got to remember, he was a dictator. Hitler was a dictator. But getting back to the sound clip here, let's go.
They were butchering white infants in the crib. They made it clear that they wanted to wipe out your entire bloodline and the bloodline of anybody who looks like you. And just imagine that for a second. Try to understand the level of moral panic and mass psychosis that must have gripped northern states for any of this to be happening. Try to imagine what a typical Southerner would do faced with a situation like that. Now, they wouldn't be interested in an insurrection or a civil war over a political or economic dispute, but they would certainly be interested in doing whatever it took to survive, and understandably so.
And that's key. Because if you go back and you read the secession documents, they talk a lot about that. South Carolina in particular. They talk about not just the fugitive slave clause, but the fact that they had people like John Brown who were fleeing to these other states and these northern states because they hated the South. They weren't returning. These criminals who were engaging in violent acts. You had, these violent abolitionists. You have to remember that you had some abolitionists who were peaceful abolitionists. They believed in maybe gradual emancipation or some type of plan to emancipate slaves. Then you had this faction, the violent faction that was attacking people on the prairie, on the plains, or wherever, in the Western Territories. And they were pairing up with the banditti out of Texas. So this is mentioned all throughout the secession documents.
And in 2026, you need to understand that a similar mass psychosis, a similar glorification of the mass murder of conservative white people, which has resulted in many deaths and which will potentially result in many, many more, is underway as we speak. The exact same sort of hysteria that led to the Civil War is once again being invoked by a major political party in this country, explicitly.
Well, maybe the problem is, I'm going to stop it there with the sound quotes because I'm going to move along here, or the sound bites rather. Well, maybe the problem is this idea of a two-party system. Maybe we need to get rid of these two parties because it seems to me, in studying all this, pardon me again, that they have caused more damage to this thing called the United States. And political parties, as I've talked about before, aren't mentioned in the Constitution. So I don't want to go in 50 different directions in the video. Let's just move on here. So this is over a Weber state, talking about the number of slave owners percentage-wise. Again, they get some of this information from the University of Virginia or University of Virginia site. So they break this down. Let me give you here the total number of slaves in the lower South, 47% of the population in that area, 2,312,352. In the upper South, 1,208,758. That's 29% of the total population. In the border states, you had 432,586. And that was 13% of the population in the border states. Now, an interesting case is New Jersey. New Jersey did not abolish slavery officially until January of 1866. So this means that all during the Civil War, from 1861 to 1865, slavery was still legally recognized under the U.S. Constitution and practiced in the border states and in a state like New Jersey. Now, they break this down here. They talk about the value of the slaves. I'm not going to go through that for the sake of time. But I will give you a number here per capita. In the South, they're saying here that, versus the North, if you're looking at, let's see what it says here, the profit and the value, increased value of slaves themselves, with only 30% of the nation's free population, South had 60% of the wealthiest men per capita in 1860. $3,978 in the South versus $2,040 in the North. But here are the percentages from University of Virginia. Mississippi, 49%. These are amount of families that own slaves or slave ownership. South Carolina, 46%. Georgia, 37%. Delaware had 3%. I think New Jersey was like 1%, but a lot of those slaves, they said, may have not been counted because by that time of the 1860 census, they had gone into these apprenticeships, so they really weren't classified at that point as slaves. Kentucky, 23%, Arkansas, 20%, Texas, 28%, Louisiana, 29%, Virginia, 26%, North Carolina, 28%, and so on and so on. So again, this is over at Weber State. So could it be that maybe there were far more issues going on in 1860 than just slavery if you only have 385,000 slave owners and you have a much larger population? In fact, you can argue you had, that slaves themselves made up a very tiny part of the population at that time, small percentage. But it is funny to see Matt Walsh come out and do these type of videos. And he talks about the civil rights movement and what happened with MLK Jr. And it's believed that MLK Jr. was possibly a communist. And he preached nonviolence, but then he had people working in his organization or what have you that acknowledged that you had protesters that were engaging in violence or attacking cops at the time. This isn't to downplay what happened during the civil rights movement. We all know about that. Again, for the sake of time. But I wanted to share this with you and just hear what you have to say in the comment section below. Let me know. But a lot of times, the story that we're told isn't the reality of what happened. It's kind of like the Mozart myth. Everyone believes Mozart was this great genius. I'm a music guy. That's what I love to do outside of work. My big hobby. I'm outside of the YouTube channel here. This isn't work for me. It's a lot of fun doing this channel. But at any rate, it's like the Mozart myth. Mozart was this great genius, and the truth is that at the time, he really wasn't known outside of his circle. It wasn't until after his death that he became better known. His father was managing his career. He had a rift between him and his father. And some of the works by Mozart may not even be by Mozart. So there's a big controversy with that as well after some of the stuff got published or what have you. So again, tell me what you think in the comments section below. Matt Walsh trying to dismantle the narrative of the quote-unquote left. Let's just face it, folks. History is not always black and white. There's a lot of gray area and a lot of context, and you have to understand what was going on in 1860 in the minds of a Southerner and the Northerner to really understand the time period. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. Follow me at Instagram, Jason197711. You can find me on Substack or go to Culture Confederacy at Culture Confed1 on X. Thanks for being with me. God bless. Keep up the culture, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.